Hello and welcome to another episode of Develop with WP, a show where I help developers at various skill levels learn more about WordPress. I'd like to start today's show off by thanking those of you who have left a lot of comments over the last week. Since posting my first video in months, I received a ton of comments. Most, if not all, were positive. And so I just want to say thank you to everyone that did post a comment and was glad to see that I'm back. So thank you. Going forward, I plan to try and do at least one video per week. I hope that will allow me to be more consistent and also produce better videos. So let's get on with the show. Today we're going to look at closures. Now you probably know closures are that thing that's on all these why JavaScript is so hard to learn lists. And you may be wondering why we're talking about this, and especially such a JavaScript topic when this is a PHP channel predominantly. Well, the reason we're going to talk about it is because we're going to learn closures in PHP, but before we do that, we're going to look at them in JavaScript. And the main reason we're going to look at them in JavaScript is because in JavaScript, closures happen more frequently and more naturally. So it seems like a good place to start. But before we even do that, we need to define what a closure is. And I found this example on Stack Exchange, and I'd like to read the whole thing and then point out a few pieces of it. So it says, the most simple way to think of a closure is a function that can be stored as a variable, referred to as a first-class function, that has a special ability to access other variables local to the scope it was created in. So it's a bit of a mouthful even for a simple definition, but the two key points is that a closure is a function that can be stored as a variable and has a special ability to access other variables local to its scope. All right, so that's really a really good definition, and I think we'll solidify that mentally in your head if you're not used to closures once we start to look at the code. All right, so let's look at the code. Right here you'll see I have a JavaScript function called greet. And this greet function takes one parameter, in this case a string for a type of greeting, and it's going to return another function which takes another string which will be the name of the person you're greeting. And then in the end, it will console log out that greeting that the first function got, concatenate it with a comma and a space, and then the name. All right. And so this is kind of what a closure is. This function right here, it is a function that has access to variables in the scope it was created in. So what that means is that while greet was not passed into this function, because of the power of closures, it has access to that greet variable and we're able to use it. So let's check this out in the browser. You can see down here, let me look at the code one more time. You can see that I'm actually console logging this out. I actually got ahead of myself though, so let's break this down a little bit more. So the beauty of closures, why you would do this, because you're probably wondering why you would do this, is that you're able to take this greet function and pass in the hello string because we want to make a function called say hello. And now greet has been preloaded with this hello function. And now say hello knows that that this variable is hello, and it's going to pass it in to itself when it gets called. So down here we actually call say hello and we pass in the second string, the name, which is Bobby, and it's going to again console log out the greet string, which it has saved as hello, plus the name. And if we look down here in the console, we see we get hello Bobby. And again, because say hello knows that it's a hello, it's supposed to say hello to somebody, all you have to do is give it a name of someone and it'll say their name. So that's kind of the benefit of a closure, is the fact that we're able to do what's called partial application here, where we're able to just partially start to build out this say hello function. If you look down here, we have a function called new greet. New greet on the surface is pretty much the same. It's the same result as if we had combining these two things together. The difference though is that we're able to make smaller, more concise functions and then reuse those and compose those into new functions and do partial application to create new functions, whereas this thing would always be the same kind of function. All right, so that's just a real basic example of a closure in JavaScript. So now let's go look at a closure in PHP. I'm going to uncomment this out. So what I've done here is I've created the exact same functionality in PHP. So you'll see that we have a say function. This could have been a greet function. I guess I should have named it greet. Let's go ahead and do that. Greet. That way there's no confusion. All right, and greet takes a string for a type of greeting, and it returns a function which takes in a name, which is a string, and then it echoes out the greet plus the concatenation with the name. Same as we saw before. The only difference is you're probably seeing is that there's this use statement. Now this use statement is how closures work in PHP, and it's the biggest difference between closures in PHP versus JavaScript. In JavaScript, this just happens naturally. This function right here automatically has access to the greet variable. But in PHP, we're not so lucky. We actually have to use this use statement and explicitly pass along which variables we want to have access to in this function. And so that's how we've accomplished this here. Then, just like in the JavaScript, we're going to create a variable called sayHello, and it's going to equal the function of greet with our first parameter passed in, which is the string of hello. And I'm going to comment this out really quick because you're going to see that in a minute. And then we're just going to execute the function sayHello with the name Bobby. And if we look and refresh this, oh no, maybe I need to save. You see that it says hello Bobby. So that's the same functionality. And so that is pretty much how you do a closure in PHP, and it's with this use statement. So at this point, you're probably thinking this is kind of cool. I get it, sorta, but let's see something worthwhile. So let's look at that. Let me comment this stuff out. In the last video I did was on array filters, and if you have no clue what an array filter is or how the function works, you should definitely check that video out first. But in that video, I described that there's a better way to do this. But in order to do that, we would have to know something else. And that something else we would need to know would be closures. So now that we've had an introduction to closures, we're going to bring it full circle and really show you, in my mind, one of the best use cases for closures in PHP. And that's utilizing it when you're using these array filter or array map or array reduce functions. So let's see what this looks like. What would have been really nice here for this function, because what this function does is it looks at this array of posts and it finds all the posts with the author of this string, Bobby Bryant, right? But what would have been really nice is if we could have wrapped this function, this all into a function, and the function would have been something like get post by author, right? It would have been really nice if we could have wrote a function like this. And now that we know closures, we can. So the way this is going to work is that this we're going to pass it the posts array, so the array of all the posts we want to loop through, and then we're going to give it the name of the author we're looking for as a string, okay? And then we're going to pretty much do everything that's right here. So I'll just grab this, and we're going to return it. And then we need to change this. Actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. This should be the author variable, we're not calling it yet. Oh man, that was pretty dumb. Am I messing? Okay, and then I'm gonna go use author. So this is our closure, and then down here we're gonna say author. Maybe it's this thing's throwing it off. Okay. I was like, what's wrong with my function? Is because of that stupid thing up there. So here's her function. Now we have a more generalized wrapper function around this array filter, and it's going to allow us to pass in a post and the posts array, and then the author we're looking for, and then via closures we're going to pass that author's variable to this anonymous function. And see, that's what we couldn't do before. Before, we couldn't dynamically populate what we wanted to compare to because we didn't have closures. But now we have closures, we can do this. And the beauty is now we can just go get posts by author, and we can give it the posts array, and then now we can give it the string of who we're looking. Actually, let's go with the other person, John Smith. All right, save that. And refresh. And there you see we get just that one post that was by the author John Smith. So that's really cool, and that's the best use case, personally, in my opinion, for closures, because now this allows us to do a lot. We could do function get posts by ID, right? And we can pass in the same posts object, and then we can pass in the ID. Same thing as before, except we need to make this the ID, and we need to make this ID, and you need to make this ID. All right, and now we have some really cool reusable functions around array filter, and you could do this for array map and all kinds of stuff. It's just these closures make this very flexible. So I'm gonna give this the post object ID of 1. Oh, I messed something up. Oh, that would probably help. I knew I didn't do something horribly wrong because it didn't give me a fatal error. So now you can see we're getting the post with the ID of 1. All right, so that is pretty much closures. I'm going to do one more example, and I got to warn you before I do this example is that it's kind of complicated. It's going to use closures multiple times. But what we're going to do is we're going to make this a little more generalized. You'll see here that we're still having to pass the same parameters into here. You also see that we have to manually say like what we're looking for. But it would be really cool if we could make an even more abstract, more generalized function that was more flexible to where we could not only tell it, we could dynamically tell it what we're looking for, but also whether we don't have to just manually put ID in here. So let's make this function. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to tell us what it's filtering. So we're going to pass it an array of data. And then we're going to return a new function. So this is going to be that partial application stuff that we were doing earlier with the say hello stuff. We're going to pass it in an item, so the item we're looking for and the value we're wanting to match, because we're going to be doing a filter. And then we're going to do our first closure, and that posts, right? We want to pass the posts along to this new function. And then we're going to return array filter. This is where we actually do what we've been doing. And it's going to get that post that we passed in via the first closure. And because we're doing an anonymous function and filtering, we're going to do a second closure. And here we want to pass along these two values, the item and value. And that's kind of a neat thing that we haven't done yet, which is pass in two variables. So you don't have to just pass one thing via this closure. You can actually pass multiple things, and that's what we're doing here. And then finally, we're going to return data and then the item. So this makes this dynamic to value. I need to get rid of this S. I need to fix some punctuation. Fixing punctuation. All right. So that's our function. Let's see it in action. That's var dump filter. Actually, we need to partially apply it. So let's go, let's say, get post by ID equals filter. Actually, no, that's not what I want to do. This is more generalized. So we're going to go filter posts. Because this filter function is really agnostic, we could pass it posts or users or whatever. We're going to say that filter posts equals filter, and we're going to pass it the post, and that's what makes this a post thing. All right, now that we've done that, we can come down into our var dump and actually use the filter posts variable, just like we did earlier with say hello, because this filter post variable now contains a function that's been preloaded with this filter function. Right now, filter posts is this first anonymous function in here. And we need to pass in an item and a value. So let's just say we want to look for the ID. We'll go ID, and then the value we're looking for is the second one. All right, let's refresh. And there you go. We get the second post with an ID of 2. Likewise, we could just be like, hey, we want the author and we want me. Because who doesn't want to read posts by me? Refresh. And now you'll see we're getting 2 posts, which are the 2 posts that I authored. So again, this is a crazy function. If you don't fully understand or get what's going on here, that's okay. It's kind of up there. But you can see now that this filter function is very, very generalized to where we could have a filter post and then later we could take it and use the same function and go like filter users equals filter, and then say we had a users array, we could pass that in. It's very, very flexible. All right, and it's using closures in multiple places. So I have to say though, just again with this last function, is that I don't even know that I would use this function because there is a fine line between something that's just very nice and very clean and something that's kind of, vague and abstract. And this might fall into that category. You got to think about that if you're working within a team. The next person, even the best developers, when they come to something like this, it's going to take them a minute to kind of wrap their head around what's going on here. And so you have to weigh those pros and cons as to whether or not this is the way to go or whether this was the great place to stop. And I think you could probably argue that this would have been the place to stop with this whole fiasco because this is very explicit and it really states what it is. It says get post by author. It tells you within the name of the function what it does. The filter function is really just a generic wrapper around array filter and it's a bit abstract. So just take that with a grain of salt. All right, so that's it for this video. Hopefully it wasn't too long. It's a lot longer than videos I've been making recently. But I hope you understand closures a little bit more. If anything, play around with this stuff and I think you'll start to grasp the idea. But closures are a very powerful thing in PHP and they can allow you to make some pretty complex stuff. So again, thanks for watching this video. Share, like, tweet, subscribe, all that kind of good stuff. And I'll see you in the next video. Crank it up.